Alright, so I've got a lot of work that I got to get passed back to you all, and I'll do that after we lecture. Alright, so today we're going to start 9.4. Fortunately, this is pretty straightforward stuff, as long as you have the formulas, kind of like everything in this entire chapter, okay? So I think the whole presentation is like 4 or 5 slides. Here you go, get that copied down, please, if you need the chapter and section. Alright, so first things first, right, what is an ellipse? An ellipse, for us, is, we tend to think of it as an elongated circle, right? But it has a few key pieces. Alright, so as far as an ellipse goes, it's going to have a co-vertex, and it's going to have 2 vertices, okay? So it's going to have vertices on the main axis, which is the long axis, or the major axis, right? The minor axis is going to be the narrow axis, and those are where the co-vertices are. So it's kind of like, remember how we were doing circles last time, right, where I just had you mark off the radius from the center and you connect the dots, right? And the ellipse is going to be very similar, but because it does have the elliptical shape to it, we need to find both vertices and both co-vertices. Is everybody all right? And because it's going to have 2 angles on it, right, 2 satellite dishes, we need one focus for each one. So it's like 2 parabolas that are intersecting. All right, so everybody okay with the basics in here, you think, yeah? All right, so for us, our ellipses are always going to be centered at 0, 0. All right, so that's everything we're dealing with is centered at the origin. Okay? So, are any major questions on the terminology? Yes, no? So vertices sit on the long axis, co-vertices sit on the short axis, right, which we also call the major axis, the long axis, and the minor axis is the short axis. All right, and then you're going to have your foci, and that's pretty much it. So as far as the actual formulas go, here you go. So these are your equations. X squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared equals 1. That's for a horizontal ellipse. Your vertices are going to be at plus or minus a, comma 0. Your co-vertices are at 0 plus or minus b. And your foci are at plus or minus c, comma 0. All right, so please get this copied down for the horizontal and the vertical ellipse. And I forgot to put this on there. So if you notice our denominators, we have an a squared and a b squared, right? Well, which is which? For us, a is always the bigger number. Okay, so you notice how a squared in the lead here and a squared under the y here? That determines which piece is your major axis and which piece is your minor axis, is where is a located. And a is always the bigger number. So just a is greater than b. And it has to be bigger than 1. All right, so please get this copied. And please do not forget this formula down here on how to find the foci. Okay, c squared is equal to a squared minus b squared. Okay, so basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to give you a formula, and when I say to graph it, you have to identify which piece is the a squared, right? Is a squared under x, or is it under y? And that determines which of these you use, just like we did with parabolas, right? Where which piece was squared, the x or the y, and that determined which formula you use. It's the same thing here, okay, except a is going to be our telltale, all right? Once we figure that out, we need to find a, we need to find b, and we need to find c, and then we just plug it in, plot our 6 points, connect the 4 outside dots to make our ellipses. Okay, graph the following equation, right? So first of all, do I have division up here at all? No, and if you look at my standard form here, I've got x squared over something plus y squared over something, but what's important? What does this equation have to be equal to? What about this one? Okay, so I have to get my x squared and y squared on the same side of the equal sign, and I have to make this thing equal 1, right? So how do I get this into that format? So first of all, are my x and y on the same side of the equal sign? Yeah, but am I equal to 1? So how do I make this thing equal 1? Divide everything by what? By the 100, right? Because what's 100 divided by 100? 1. So I'm going to get equals 1, and that's what I have to have for my ellipse. Everybody all right with that? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, what's 4 over 100 reduced to? Okay, so I need to keep it as a fraction. So 4 goes into 4 once, and how many times does 4 go into 100? 25 times, right? What's a quarter of 100, right? Everybody okay? Plus, what's 25 over 100 reduced to? 4. Everybody okay with that, yes or no? If you don't know how to do that on the calculator, come up and see me sometime, and I'll show you how to type it in depending on which calculator you use, so it'll spit it out to you in improper fractional form. Okay? But if you notice, I need to have nothing up top, just the x squared, and just the y squared. I need to be equal to 1, and then these are my a's and b's, right? So a is always the bigger number. So which number is bigger, the number under x squared or the number under y squared? Under x squared, right? So if you come over here, that tells you which formula we use. So where's the a at? Under x, right? So I'm using the horizontal formula. Is everybody okay with how I determine that? Yes, no? So that means that my a squared is equal to 25, and my b squared is equal to 4, right? So I want just a, and I just want b. I don't want a squared. So what's my a going to be equal to? If a squared is 25, what's a? 5. And if b squared is 4, what's b? 2. Everybody okay so far?
Like, how do you know, like, what's A?
A is the bigger number. So a squared is always the bigger bottom. So you might get decimals out of here, right? Like if that was a 13 in the bottom, you just square with 13. Everybody good? Yeah? All right, so I need A and I need B and I also need C, right? So if you look at the formula for a focus, it says that you get C squared equal to A squared minus B squared. Everybody okay with that? Yes? All right, so what's my A squared value? 25, and what's my B squared? And what is 25 minus 4? 21. So I need to know my C. So what am I going to do with that 21? Square root it, and we're going to get a plus or minus, right? So what is the square root of 21? Plus or minus 4 point what? I need that out 4 decimal places. 5325? 5825. All right, everybody okay with that? Yes, no, maybe? So I have my A, I have my B, and I have my C. Those are the 3 pieces of information I need so I can find my vertices, my co-vertices, and my foci. Okay, so up first are my vertices. Spelled with an I, right? Sorry, I'm bad with words. Yeah, okay. You come over here, right? Our vertices are located at plus or minus A0, right? Everybody okay as to why we're using the top equation? Right, because A was under the x squared, right? So what's my A value again? 5. So my vertices are at plus or minus 5, 0. So that gives you 2 vertices, right? 5, 0, negative 5, 0. Everybody okay with that? Yes or no? Okay. And then I have my co-vertices. They're going to be at 0 plus or minus B. So what's my B value? 2. So I get 0 plus or minus 2. All right. Any questions so far? We all right? Okay. And then we have our foci. Okay. Now foci are always on the major axis. So they're going to match whatever the format for the vertices are. Okay. So the value that you got for your focus was plus or minus 4.5825. I'm not going to have enough room to write that. So we get plus or minus 4.5825, comma 0, because the foci will always match the format of the vertices. Okay, so our vertices are number, comma 0, so my foci will be number, comma 0. Everybody okay with that, yes or no? So again, if you go back, your foci are plus or minus C0 if you're a horizontal ellipse. If you're a vertical ellipse, it's 0 plus or minus C, because the vertices and the foci have to match. Okay, because they're on the same axis. They're always on the major axis. Everybody all right? Okay. So now I get to plot all my points. So I need more room here, so un momento. I should be good with that. Okay, so real quick, where are foci going to be? Are foci going to be inside the ellipse or outside the ellipse? They're always going to be inside, right? Because the curve points inside. So remember, if you have a curve, the focus has to be in the curve. Everybody all right? Because when I was checking out some of your quizzes and just thumbing through them, some of you were getting your directrix, like you were putting the directrix inside, and the focus outside. A focus will always sit inside the curve. Okay? So my vertices are at 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and negative 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everybody okay with that, yes or no? Where are my co-vertices? Positive 2, 0, negative 2, 0, or sorry, 0, positive 2, and 0, negative 2? Everybody okay with those 4 dots so far, yes or no? So these 4 dots are what's going to make my ellipse. Okay? So I can actually graph my ellipse right now. And you are basically going to just make it like a football. Everybody okay? Right, and again, this doesn't have to be perfect looking as long as I have my vertices accurate and my co-vertices accurate. So this is a vertex, this is a co-vertex. So whenever you graph these, I do want you to label them, so that way I know that you know what you're talking about. Okay. Everybody okay? Yes, no, maybe? So what's the last thing that I have to do? What's the last thing I have to plot? What haven't I done yet? The foci, right? So my foci are going to be at plus or minus 4.5825. So 1, 2, 3. Wow, that's a really big dot. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.58. 1, 2, 3, 4.58. So you're going to have a focus here and a focus here. So you do have to be careful. If you notice when I labeled inside the graph, I'm using the singular term, right? This isn't listed as a vertex, this is a vertex, right? Vertex, vertex, co-vertex, co-vertex, focus, focus. Up here, I'm listing them as plurals, right? So it's vertices, co-vertices, and foci. So please make sure that you're using the appropriate version of the term. All right, so everybody okay with what's going on up here? I know it's a little weird, but again, if you know how to use the formula, this gets really repetitive in a hurry. Okay? So one of the big things is making sure that you're picking the right formula to use. Yes? Okay, so once you get it equal to 1, right, you look at the bottoms. The bigger number is your A. So which number is bigger? 25, right? And which variable is it under? X. So that means that over here, I picked the one where A is under X. And then that tells you everything else you need to know. Okay? Everybody good? Yes, no, maybe? Any questions on the language up here? Like vertices, co-vertices, and foci? Everybody good with that? Yes, no, maybe? Any questions on how I got any of the points? So this is what I should see on your graph, right? Every time you graph these, I need the 4, I need the 2 vertices, the 2 co-vertices, and I need the 2 foci. Your ellipse will only go through co-vertices and vertices. Okay? Your graph will never pass through a focus. Remember, the focus has to be inside the graph. Is everybody okay with that? Yes or no? Okay. And then just label stuff and you're done. So the last thing that I want to cover is this setup. Write an equation of the ellipse that has a vertex at 0, 4, a co-vertex at negative 3, 0, and a center at 0, 0. So let me transfer everything over here. All right, so first things first. The reason why they give you the center is because we only use these formulas when our graph is centered at 0, 0. So if our center is somewhere other than 0, 0, then these formulas don't hold up. Everybody okay with that? So the fact that they tell you that it's centered at 0, 0 means that you can use these formulas. Okay? So that's all that's really there for. So they give us a vertex and a co-vertex. We have to figure out which version of our equation are we going to use. Are we going to use x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared equals 1, or are we going to use x squared over b squared plus y squared over a squared equals 1? So what we're going to do is this is just like what we did in the previous section. We have to look at what they give us and then work backwards, right? So look at the vertex. Is the vertex a number and then 0, or a 0 and then a number? 0 and then a number. So if we go to our formulas, which one of these has a vertex that's a 0 and then a number? The vertical setup, right? So that tells you that this formula is the formula we're going to use. Everybody okay? So we know that we're going to be using x squared over b squared plus y squared over a squared equals 1. Okay? Where does A come from? A vertex or a covertex? A vertex, right? And where does B come from? The covertex. So all I do is plug in these numbers. Okay, so is B a vertex or a covertex? B. That's the covertex, right? So I'm going to get x squared over negative 3 squared plus y squared over, where does A come from? The vertex, right? Everybody okay with that part? Yes, no, maybe? So then just simplify. So I get x squared over 9 plus y squared over 16 equals 1, and you're done. So this isn't hard as long as you know how to translate from a vertex-covertex to picking the right equation and then putting the numbers in the right place, right? So the number for a covertex is always a B, and the number from a vertex is always an A. Okay, because remember, the vertex is your major axis. That's the bigger number, right? And the covertex is your minor axis, which means it's smaller. Everybody okay with that connection? Yes, no, maybe. Any questions on this? Okay, so if you can't tell, this section is going to be huge on you being able to pick the right equation. Okay, and then once you find A, B, and C, you just plug it in like we did before with P. Okay, but now that we have two foci, and we'll have not only vertices, but we'll also have covertices. All right, so any major questions on this? Yes, no, maybe? All right, so this is the entire section. All right, here's your homework assignment. Please take a look. And just like the last assignment, 36 through 41, I only want you to identify if the equation is a circle, a parabola, or an ellipse. All right, so you have to determine, is it going to present a circle, is it going to present an ellipse, or is it going to present a parabola, right? So the standard forms of those equation types that I've asked you to write down, you're going to be using, right? Everybody okay with that? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. So if you can't tell, the assignment's not huge, but these are all, well, 3 through 8 is graphing. 18 through 25 is the second type of problem, where they give you two characteristics and they want you to find the equation. So once you get this copied down, you have the rest of the hour to get to work. 15 minutes.